Right. Hey, what's up, guys? Um, yeah, I'm gonna do Anthony Edwards finally, and then I have Chris Smith and Kira Lewis. We'll see how much time I have before my daughter wakes up here and starts. Yeah, you know, takes me away from being able to focus on this, unfortunately. So yeah, we'll start with Edwards. I want to give a shout out to Spencer um, Perlman, my colleague at the Stepien, Cameron Pern, I believe his name is. He, I believe, wrote a Edwards report. Also, Zach Milner. Um, obviously, everybody at the Stepien does a great job. Everyone has done their own version of scouting reports, and I think they had done some great job on Edwards. After I finished writing like the notes for this, I looked over theirs as well, and I thought they had some great points in theirs, and I think theirs, in some sense, are more in depth than what I could bring here. Well, I mean, I suppose we have a lot of agreements, but I think you guys theirs came out earlier, and I think you guys should definitely check theirs out. And I don't think there's a reason for me to, um, outside like the main things that are necessary to cover with Edwards. I don't want to go over the same things that you could see in Spencer's and Zach's stuff that came out a bit earlier than mine. But I'll try to hit on some of the points that I feel like either I have disagreements with, which actually there isn't too much disagreement here, and or points that I kind of feel like are ones that I feel individually among they aren't necessarily disagreements per se, but I just didn't see a Mac. I'm sorry, not Max. There's a point here that I wanted to speak with that Max Carlin made. I don't. He's not a stepping colleague, but he made an interesting point about Edwards. But yeah, there's some points that Spencer or Zach or Cam didn't touch on in their scouting reports for whatever reason, or at least I didn't see them really touch on that. I don't know what their stance is exactly, so I'll give my stance on it. That doesn't mean I necessarily disagree with them. I just it's kind of a just a point outside of what they said. But I will cover like some of the general stuff just to in case you somehow don't know about Edwards or you have like a somewhat surface level understanding of his game, so you get a little bit more knowledge about him, and just see how I generally feel about him as a prospect and my kind of scouting and evaluation of him as a projecting to the NBA. So Anthony Edwards, of course, we'll start with the shot making. He shot actually just 35.7 effective field goal percentage on pull-up jumpers, which is not horrible for a freshman, but it's definitely, he gets a lot of credit because he'll have these really impressive shots at times that he's able to make, and he just has a certain aura of ease and what's the word, like the game seems to come so naturally and easily to him. Like he'll pull up for like a 30 footer, and it'll look so like nothing. Like he just knocked down a 30 footer right over hand in his face, and it's like he just scored a wide open layup. But in reality, if you look at the results overall, he actually shot not that great on pull-up jump shots, and I do think he had 147 pull-up jump shots attempts, which is a pretty high volume. It's not like incredible volume. There are guys out there like I mean, obviously like somebody like a Trae Young who had this incredible usage, but even guys with lower usage that have shot more pull-ups than Edwards in the past seasons, and I'm sure even this season I could probably find some, but that's a pretty good volume, especially for a younger freshman. So obviously some of those shots aren't going to be great, and I think obviously his shot selection is something that's he's been criticized for a lot, and I do think that's a fair criticism, and I'll get into some of the reasons why he has that shot selection. But the obvious one is just his own mental makeup and just approach and decision making, just his choice, quote unquote, to take those shots, and he's definitely a guy that will take a lot of really questionable shots, seemingly for no without like good justification for taking them. I'll say, like there will be like 23 seconds left on the shot clock, and it's he still has his dribble alive or still has the opportunity to dribble, and obviously could pass always. But for some reason, decides to pull up for contested long two or contested 27-foot 3 pointer. Excuse me. Um, with defender all over him or off balance, or his shot at times, like, he'll go up with good balance and go straight up and down. It looks really good, but other times you'll see him like churn his body, kick his legs out, be fading seemingly for no good reason. And on spot ups, he doesn't look super comfortable. Doesn't always get great rhythm. I think I'll get into his mechanics here a little bit. Yeah, some unnecessary motion and kind of steps to his mechanics. As I said, kicks his legs out and turns his body a lot, and a bit of a slingshot. He really does like to get his elbows into it. Almost, I wouldn't say he puts it like behind his head all the way, but definitely a bit of a slingshot and a little bit flat at times as well. Even though his touch overall, I would say, is pretty decent, and he's a guy that shot in the mid 60s on free throws in AAU, but got it up by the end of the season. I think he was in the mid, maybe even high 70s from the free throw line. Um, of course, Edwards, 6'5". I would venture a guess that he's at about a 6'11" wingspan, pretty wide chest. So that leads me to maybe 8'6" standing reach. And at the time of the draft, I think this is something that gets a little bit overlooked with Edwards. He's 18.8 years old, so he's really young for this class. And of course, he's a guy that originally part of the 2020 high school class and reclassified. And yeah, I think that's kind of gets a little bit overlooked with him as far as him being, one of the younger, especially among U.S. prospects, really on the younger side. And I think that's definitely uh, significant plus towards him as a prospect. Excuse me, but yeah, on spot up, 67 spot up no dribble jumper attempts, 47% effective field goal percentage, which for a freshman is a little bit more forgivable, but is still well below average for somebody again who so much of who he is as a player on the court is shot making and shooting, and his results just haven't been there, even on spot up jump shots. Excuse me, and I definitely, you know, he's a two guard that could has some primary upside, but I think one of his more realistic upside outcomes is kind of a more like periphery, like second, third option two guard, especially if you're looking at him um, through a lens of upside and like a optimistic outcome for him, but on a winning, championship contending NBA team, you're likely looking at him as like a third option or something like that. And to succeed in that role, you would obviously like him to be a lot more effective as an off-ball shot maker shooter. Uh, so I don't know if he is that great of a pure shooter, but he is a really capable shot maker when he gets hot. And obviously has it's kind of weird that he has the aggressive mentality as far as getting shots up, and he could definitely has no issue like with confidence and taking some really difficult shots, but at the same time he just does not get to the rack consistently for a guy who has his sort of athletic tools. And obviously I should get into just his movement and his body and his ability to cover ground quickly. His explosiveness off 2 feet is really impressive. He could really dunk on somebody's head if he gets a little time to get up off 2 feet. But is a capable leaper of one as well. Pretty good at that as well. Again, very strong. I think one thing that I wanted to mention that Max, as I mentioned earlier, Max Carlin, shout out to him. Check out Preps to Pros podcast with him and Ben Pfeiffer. Yeah, Max made this point, and it's something that as I watched Edwards more, especially like towards the end of the season when he started to attack the rim more, and I felt like he had some of his best performances, like at the very like five, six, last half a dozen games of the season or so. Um, you saw with Edwards attacking more, you kind of saw some of the issues with why maybe he doesn't attack more besides mental approach. And as Max brought this up, his ball control with dribbling and just the way his handle kind of limits him, he still kind of has struggles with uh, uh, having a tight handle, contained handle, and executing crossovers quickly, dribbling with pressure on him, and obviously, thanks to his athleticism and quick change of direction, he's able to make some really impressive moves at times. But his control of the ball is below par, especially if you're looking at him as a primary initiator eventually down the line. I know there's some kind of disagreement, I guess, and some I wouldn't say controversy, but like, yeah, just people have differing opinions about what they see, or what kind of archetype they see Edwards in Upside Outcomes. Again, I think some people see him more as like pure two, more off ball kind of scorer, whereas others see him as kind of this big initiator type you're gonna really run your offense through, at least in an Upside Outcome again. And I think most people would agree that both of those outcomes are possibilities, but the disagreement comes where which one is more likely, um, and yeah, which one should you be kind of developing Edwards for if you do draft him, and which one is his skill set and talents are the best fit for. So that is an interesting kind of issue, and I think I definitely understand why people would say the more kind of likely upside outcome is him being like a more pure two off ball off guard. But I think just from watching him in AU in Georgia, I wonder if he has the mentality for that. And again, his spot up shooting and his off ball play is still kind of at lower stages of development. He's definitely a guy who, you know, pull up jump shooting and having the ball in his hands is such a big part of his game to this point. So I would think that if you do acquire Edwards, which spoiler alert, I would be hesitant to do. But if you do acquire Edwards, you're probably gonna be. I would probably be trying at least early on to see how much I could get out of him as initiator type, and if I could improve his decision making and improve his ball handling and stuff like that. And of course, at the same time, you're gonna try to work on his off ball shooting as well, and you do both. But I would think at least the way he's developed so far, he would more naturally continue to develop in the arc where he's a guy who has the ball in his hands rather than trying to force him into a more off-ball role. But I think I understand where both are coming from, and I wouldn't be like shocked if he turns out a more of an off-ball guy, or if that's kind of ends up being the way that he develops and perhaps succeeds. But yeah, I mean, again, there's no denying how quick he is, how fast he is in transition. Some of the plays he's able to make, just changing directions and with like body mechanics after picking up the dribble. If he already kind of gathers to the dribble, the two steps that he has, he could really eat up space and like really sharply change direction and get around guys. Some really impressive plays there. And again, really strong and could finish through contact and explosive. 30 out of 51, so nearly 60% at the rim out of pick and roll ISO spot up, which is a very impressive efficiency. And I think that will continue to be the case even at the NBA level. But 51 attempts, considering his usage, considering the 147 pull-up jump shots, uh, you know, um, considering his role and everything, and considering the athleticism he has, is definitely disappointing volume. And I think obviously the handle, as I mentioned, definitely has something to do with that. But I also think a lot of it is still on his mentality and his approach and just his tendency to play without any purpose, or sometimes players are criticized to of being making decisions without reading the defense, and kind of you know putting their head down and trying to score, or forcing passes even if the defense is playing them for the pass and kind of giving them a wide open layup. But with Edwards, it's almost like the opposite. It's that he doesn't, forget making a decision once the defense, as a read and react to the defense. He doesn't even have anything in the first place. He just kind of, he doesn't even have any plan in the first place for himself. Like, he doesn't even get to the first step, let alone the read and react, the deeper level of it. He just, it almost seems like as if he's just out there and, Oh, I'm the top scorer on this team, so I should probably shoot a jump shot right now. All right, he kind of just does things just because there's no, again, no purpose, no rhyme or reason behind it. There's no, yeah, like I think basketball is a game of timing and rhythm, and I think Edwards mentally really struggles with that. And despite all the physical talents that he has, that's something that um, for guards at least, that's a really, really major weakness. Another thing that's interesting to notice that Edwards actually shot a 40% effective field goal percentage on jump shots outside 17 feet. 2-point jump shots outside 17 feet last year in the half court, but just 6 out of 23 on jump shots within 17 feet and 5 out of 22 on runners. So combined 11 out of 45 on those like kind of closer but not at the rim finishing shots. So that's interesting that he kind of struggles with those closer shots and the ease with which he shoots from further out. And I think looking at his mechanics, I do think there is some credence to the theory that because he does use his elbow so heavily and because he shoots kind of a little bit of a slingshot, these closer shots where you have to more kind of put a really soft touch on it and just kind of shoot with your wrist lightly. I think he has a little bit of struggles. It's kind of like almost being too strong. I've noticed in the past, not to get too deep into personal anecdotes, but when I kind of work out for a while, and really lift weights. Sometimes when I start playing basketball after that, the ball feels almost like light and it's almost easier to shoot from further out. And I think I've noticed that also with some stronger players who kind of have problems with finishing touch, like in close, but feel more comfortable from further out. Less so at like NBA and the Division 1 level, but I mean more like playground level, like some of the people I've played in like pickup games and stuff that are kind of these build guys and kind of struggle with touch and close, but just because of their strength, they have no issue shooting for further out. So yeah, I think Edwards may have a little bit of that for him. Again, it's more rare to see that type of thing at these higher level guys that are so good from everywhere. So it doesn't really matter if they're strong or not. But I mean, it does, but you know, less so. But yeah, for him, I think that might be an issue a little bit again because he shoots with his elbow so much. That's my theory, at least on it. It's still 45 attempts is not a huge amount, and when I brought this up to others, they kind of wrote it off as just being a small sample size, and I definitely think that's part of the case here, and the small sample size is definitely worth noting as well. And it may not be an issue at all when it comes down to it, but I think there might be some credence to that. Yeah, does way too much with his lower body as far as kicking his legs out. Yeah, it should be getting a lot more at the rim. I will say, it is interesting that he is really effective as a cutter relative to most guards and smaller players. But I think people sometimes forget that Tom Crean is kind of infamous for involving his top guards and top wing players. If you go back to like Victor Oladipo and Dwayne Wade, who Edwards has gotten some comparisons to this year because of that Tom Crean connection. You'll see a lot of plays where they're kind of used as baseline cutters, especially Oladipo. He hardly was used as a self-creator off the dribble early on in his Indiana career. He was very much a guy who kind of ran the baseline, got up for lobs, and kind of, played in maybe in the middle of his zone, flashing in the paint and stuff like that. So Edwards is a more advanced ball handler than Oladipo, and probably even more so than Dwayne Wade at the same age, because you got to remember Wade came from junior college, and I'm guessing I don't. Well, he wasn't a highly rated recruiter or anything, so I'm guessing early on in his career, like as a freshman, and especially as an 18-year-old, he probably wasn't a very advanced, self-creator and like shot maker in particular. So yeah, that is worth noting. I mean, obviously, I think the big difference with guys like those two, especially, is just the feel for the game, as I talked about, just the approach and feel for the rhythm and timing of what's going on around him, and just awareness and recognition. In general, I think those guys are much, much more instinctual and have better natural feel for the game than Edwards seems to, at least at this point, and he's definitely some of the atrocious decision making. Really reminds me of Dennis Smith Jr. First of all, and you may say that Smith was much smaller, and I do think the difference in size is quite advantageous for Edwards relative to Smith. However, I'm also reminded of Emmanuel Mudiay, who I do think has similar build and kind of height and length measurements to Edwards, maybe slightly less length. I don't know, but I don't think it's like a huge difference. And of course, again, was a very well built and strong guy. Not quite as explosive vertically as Edwards, but I think there's a lot of similarity mentally and as far as approach and kind of, again, I don't want to repeat the same terms, but kind of feel for the rhythm of the game and all that, and just instincts and all that. Um, and just some horrible, inexplicable, like 1-on-4 drives, contested long twos with 24 seconds on the shot clock. And this is like not just once in a while, not just heat checks. I'm pretty forgiving of heat checks. Like I feel like momentum in basketball games is real, and if you could hit like a really big shot that really kind of turns the feel of the game and kind of gets the other team down, or if you're at home, maybe gets your crowd involved, or if you're on the road, gets the other crowd really quiet, stuff like that. I do think that's important, and I'm forgiving if you take some really difficult shots, in the pursuit of, that sort of momentum change, as they call it. But some of his are not momentum changers. They're just inexplicable, contested fadeaway long twos with 26 seconds or whatever on the fucking shot clock. I jokingly made a plus 45 stat, or 45 plus stat, which is feet away from the basket and seconds left on the shot clock. If it's, for Edwards, he has a lot of these 45 plus shots where it's like 22 seconds in the shot clock and 23-foot contested fadeaway. So that's 45. I mean, obviously, if they're wide open, I'm more forgiving even for further shots. But, when they're contested, um, yeah, I'm not saying that's an actual stat. You should like be counting that and using that because there's a lot of obviously stuff involved in that. But just as a joke, Edwards takes like 4 or 5 of those per game or something like that, and yeah, I don't know how even considering the his role within Georgia and obviously was expected to be this high volume scorer, he should not be taking those shots. There's absolutely no reason. And the funny thing is, when you watch Edwards in interviews, he seems like a really smart guy. He comes off very self-aware and understanding of kind of his drawbacks and the criticisms that he's faced. But for some reason, this continues on. I mean, again, to give him credit, he did seem a little bit better with attacking and passing up poor shots more late in the season. But I'm a little bit skeptical how much of that was just kind of the ebbs and flows of the season. You're gonna have a streak of good games and a streak of bad games, and how much of that was actually him genuinely, being on some kind of trend of development and improvement. Um, I definitely think he could be looking for his teammates more. Just using his drive to set up teammates could make him a lot more effective. He does show some really impressive vision at times, which is kind of one of the things that I feel like some people kind of confound about him as a prospect, because he has these really impressive moments of passing vision and kind of understanding of creativity and angles as a passer. They'll kind of be like, well, no, Edwards has good feel for the game. And yes, in the sense that he has passing vision and kind of creativity as a playmaker for teammates, to that extent, he does have good basketball IQ or feel for the game or whatever you want to call it. But as a more kind of broad and, before you get to what's actually happening on the court, what is your approach, kind of your axiom as a basketball player? What is your approach and kind of purpose and overall philosophy to approaching the game? When you're out there, when you first step on the court, what are you planning to do? And obviously, everybody wants to win and everybody wants to play good. But what does that mean to you, and how are you gonna go about that? And I feel like Edwards doesn't have particular way or consistent approach, or an approach that falls within, again, the rhythm and timing of the game, as they say, the corny ass cringe, what is it called, cliche that they always say basketball is jazz. But I mean, there is some truth to that. There is a kind of a rhythm and feel to the game that the best players have, and especially when you're a guard, when you're a perimeter player that has a heavy usage role and a heavy playmaking and creation role, whether for yourself or others. You really need that to be a successful player at the top level. And Edwards is able to succeed to some extent at the college level through his physical talents and some of that vision and creativity as a passer. Maybe once he's already in the middle of a play, but as far as his kind of original position mentally to as far as approach to the game, I really think that's lacking. And in my experience, that's a pretty reliable, relatively. There's nothing that's a sure thing in the draft ever, but relatively, it's a fairly reliable sign of somebody that's unfortunately not going to work out in the NBA, and that's really concerning to me. And it's something that I've often noticed with guys like in the past, like Moody and Dennis Smith. But because I was told by so many others that who I trust and whose opinions I value and who've done this scouting thing for longer than I have, that no, these guys are talented, they're young, they'll figure it out. Yeah, sure, there's a chance they'll bust, but you should take a risk on their talent. And while I was still lower than some on those two guys and some of the other guys, like Darius Garland, he's just a rookie, so I don't want to curse him or anything or speak ill of him too early. But he's another guy who I feel like is part of that group. Dante Exum is another one, by the way. But I didn't watch a huge amount of him pre NBA, so also I don't want to. But Moutier and Dennis Smith, I watched a lot of, and yeah. I was confident, and they're pretty comparable, like as far as like being athletic freaks and having this strong body, especially Moutier physically, and Smith just as far as being a great athlete. So yeah, I know I'm kind of ranting a little bit, but I just think this is a really important thing, and people still to this day don't give it enough credit. And I really, part of me really wants to just cash out and put Dennis Smith like 15th or something, maybe a little bit, maybe like 11th or say or something like that. I mean, I'll still keep him in the lotto, but if he busts and I do that, I'm gonna look like a genius in a few years. But also, another part of me, I'm freaking terrified, and if I put him 11th, and I just look like a complete idiot. So there's definitely a lot of things he's really impressive in as far as his athleticism and again physical talent, like just his build and his size, and he has those flashes of vision and creativity still. And another thing that I really like about him, no offense to Emmanuel Moody or Dennis Smith, I don't know them personally or anything, but his interviews are really impressive, and he seems like a really great guy. Seems like a guy that is open to coaching, is open to criticism, is trying to improve, is again self-aware, understands what's going on around him well. Like he seems like a really smart and really what's the word, like personable, like uh, 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 um, like mentally attractive, like somebody who people will get along with, essentially. So all those things are definitely in his favor. Again, not to say Dennis Smith and Moody aren't that, but I don't think they're exactly like outstanding in those features the way that Edwards is. And I think that's something that people have said that Edwards, a big thing for him will be the right coaching staff and kind of the right fit. So I do think that will probably play into my ultimate evaluation of Edwards. I'm gonna wait till the draft day and see where he actually gets picked, and if he gets picked to a franchise where there is a kind of a renowned coaching staff and a kind of good system around him for development and stuff like that, I'll probably be a little bit higher on him. But if being a low lottery pick, there's a lot of struggling kind of franchises in that area, obviously. So if he goes to a franchise that maybe doesn't have the best infrastructure, um, I'll probably be yeah, somewhat lower on Edwards, and probably lower than the majority of people on him. even overwhelming majority of people. Um, yeah, his catch and go is really impressive. Coming sharp off pick and roll and attacking the big man's hip. Oh no, he could do. I wrote here. He could do a better job coming down sharp. Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember now. Yeah. Again, this goes a little bit to the handle and just being loose with the ball, but also just fundamentally and footwork wise and stuff like that. Just coming sharp off pick and roll and getting right downhill, getting low, and yeah, attacking big man's outer leg and all that. Yeah, I think part of the reason he's not a great spot up shooter is just doesn't always get a great rhythm between upper and lower body. So it becomes kind of a two motion shot that's really dependent on wrist and of course the elbow that he loves so much, and doesn't really his lower body doesn't really play a part in it fluidly, and then sometimes it leads to him making these weird kind of kickouts and churns with his body to get that part of his body more involved in the shot, and it becomes less accurate and all that. Footwork pre-shot could definitely use work also as far as just being prepared and ready to step in or hop into the spot up. Uh, but definitely, I do think he has an good opportunity for improvement there. Again, I feel like he's a guy who's open to coaching and seems again very personable and fairly intelligent person as well. And I think most would agree who have seen a good amount of his interviews. So that's definitely something that makes me a little bit more optimistic about Edwards, and again keeps me from just putting my nuts on the table and saying no, I have Anthony Edwards 11th or 12th or whatever. Definitely some skepticism for me that he's gonna 180 with his approach, recognition, and decision making. But there's also enough talent there, and considering some of the other guys in this class, it's understandable why I wouldn't totally sell on him. Defensively, I think he could make some really impressive plays on and off ball with his athletic ability and size. When he's engaged, he's a pretty versatile defender who can guard even most forwards, at least in a pinch, and quicker guards as well. I remember there's a game I watched against Alabama where Kira Lewis was absolutely destroying them. I think the smaller Xavier Wheeler was guarding Lewis, and Lewis was just eating him alive. And Edwards then switched on Lewis, and he did a great job mirroring him and kind of bodying him up on drives. Yeah, he definitely has some defensive upside and capability, but he does fall asleep and lose focus and kind of exhibit a lot of poor technique that leads to blow-bys, drifts off ball, just being not in position to neither help or recover those no man's land. Just again, no purpose, no discipline. The awareness is not great. Just yeah, my just final thoughts is that it's difficult to see him as a winning player. Is there some likelihood of high volume kind of productivity as far as points per game and stuff like that? Sure, it's possible. He is, especially if he's going to go as the number one pick, and he's going to carry a lot of load offensively. But I think his best role for a winning team is likely going to be more of a 3 and D guy if he does end up, in my estimation of his realistic upside. Again, as I said, if I drafted him number one or number three or whatever, I would probably try to make him a primary and try to make him a high offensive load guy. But what his most likely outcome, as far as a good outcome on a winning team, on a contending team, I think is more of a 3 and D guy who doesn't need to make too many decisions on either end. It kind of knocks down shots, could attack a little bit off the dribble, and kind of uses physical tools and all that to be effective defender. If he really engages on the defensive end and if he gets the right coaching and stuff, I think that's his more realistic upside. So overall, I'm definitely lower on Edwards either way than a lot of people are. But how much lower am I completely out on him? I'm still kind of undecided, and I think it'll depend on the coaching, the infrastructure, as I said. But yeah, I mean, Yeah, sorry, I'm just looking over my notes if there's anything I wanted to add. I think that's about it. Yeah, it'll just depend on the team he goes to, and the one thing that's keeping me from being all the way out on him is the combination of size and athleticism relative to like Smith Jr. or even like Moody. He may have a similar physical build, but he's a little bit, I think, quicker and more explosive vertically. So that gives him a little bit of a higher floor and median outcome, I guess, which in a draft like this one keeps me from being completely out on him until I figure out where he actually ends up. Uh, yeah, let me take a breath here and we'll go. Should I go to Kira? I'll go Chris Smith real quick. Let me do Chris Smith. Chris Smith, he has entered the draft for UCLA, but I don't see him at least at this point as kind of high end pick or anything. So I'll do kind of a somewhat quicker, hopefully. I always say that, but then I go on forever. I'm at 36 minutes. That's all right. Edwards is one of the top guys, so yeah. But I'll go quickly with Smith. I think there's not a huge amount to say about him. He's a fairly versatile guy. Has a few things that he could do decently well, but to some degree, kind of a jack of all trade, master of none, I guess. But here I'll talk about it. I'll just start. I always suck at starting these. I don't know how to start them, but then once I get into it, I just freaking rant and rant. So Smith is coordinated and fairly skilled at his size. There's a 6'9" measurement I think out there. I think he's probably a little bit closer to 6'8" in shoes. I believe, reading that he has a 6'11" wingspan. I think that sounds about right. So that would lead me to believe he has about 8'10" standing reach, something like that. And he'll be 20.5 years old on July 1st, which, obviously one of the things he's kind of quote unquote infamous for as a prospect is his incredibly young age for junior. He's born in December of '99, which is younger than a lot of sophomores and younger than several freshmen like Precious Achuba, Cassius Stanley, um, among others, Oscar Schubwe as well. So yeah, that's kind of one of the main appeals with him. Besides just having that size and coordination to play the kind of big wing role, which is so coveted in today's NBA, so many teams are looking for. He's fairly capable of attacking off the dribble. Can make shots kind of on the move off the dribble, like quickly get into his pull up in a fairly impressive manner. Again, considering his size, runners and pull ups like. These closer range jump shots within like 15 feet. He's pretty skilled in 1438 on runners and 39.7 effective field goal percentage and 78 pull-up jump shots, which may not seem amazing, but again, considering he's 6'8" and he's younger for a junior and a guy who's made some pretty rapid developments throughout his UCLA career. Remember, again, as a freshman, he was only a few weeks away from not even being old enough to be eligible for the draft, even if he wanted to enter. That's how young he was as a freshman. So, yeah. But still, with all that being said, he definitely still has poor awareness. Really struggles seeing defenders and just being, again, kind of aware and recognizing where the defense is, where the opposing team is. You'll see him get stripped or just kind of dribble himself into where the help is a lot of times. The vision is not great. He's capable ball handler and has a pretty nice crossover where he covers ground well, gets into forward movement with good flexibility and agility, considering his size. Can go left as well, and you'll see him go to his runner, to his righty runner when he goes to left. But yeah, just as far as decision making and just again, just being aware of the opposing team. Actually, on both ends, he has some of that on the defensive end as well. But offensively, yeah, just yeah, throwing passes right to defenders, and fairly high turnover rate. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head, but all things considered, that's definitely kind of problematic because this is a guy that the reason you'd likely draft him is that he has those ball skills at his size, but how functional those ball skills are at the NBA level is a bit of a question. Um, he has improved the shootings. I think I like his mechanics. Has pretty good 1-2 rhythm and spot ups. Just kind of the 1-2 step as they call it. The results aren't quite there yet, just 43.5 effective field goal percentage on 93 spot up attempts the last 2 years combined. But it looks pretty good. I think the problem with him right now still is kind of range. He's a guy, again, who's more comfortable even off the dribble and kind of mid range or like these shorter range and jumpers and kind of runners. But from longer range, he kind of still struggles to, keep his mechanics exactly the same. You'll see him leaning in and kind of forcing himself a little bit. It's kind of weird, he's not like he's super weaker and you think he has a pretty good build and pretty good frame and everything. So I don't know exactly why it's that way, but a lot of guys, younger guys, kind of take time to develop more comfort from deeper range. And considering that he has had, where he was as a freshman was nowhere near an NBA prospect, and as a sophomore he got better, but still it was very much in question where if he was a legitimate NBA prospect. But as a junior now, while I think he's a fringe prospect, he's definitely a prospect. So to see that continued development from him, obviously being so young, I expected him to improve. So, but he's improved beyond my expectations every single season, and that's definitely impressive. And I think something that's worth kind of keeping in mind and considering with him going forward. And being optimistic about him going forward, and of course improving even after I'm sorry, improving under a different coaching staff this year. Um, Despite his size, he's not very adept at using it, and not quite strong enough. Like again, he has a pretty decent frame, but he's not like very much a power or bully player, and he's not like again coordinated, flexible, fluid, but not somebody I would call like super quick or explosive. Doesn't always create separation versus quicker defenders, and I think right now that's kind of his Achilles, so to say, is even though he has the size, you could kind of just put a smaller, quicker guy on him. And Smith is not really able to take advantage of his size that much. And, along with the decision making, I think those are the two things that make me more hesitant about drafting him, at least on the offensive end, because I don't feel like he would be a guy that I would be able to play on an NBA team at this point. Now, again, I'm somewhat encouraged by the continued development, and it makes me think that he perhaps is worthy of a pick, but he's definitely not a guy that's ready to play in the NBA in his first season, and in his second season, probably even not ready to play more than maybe a few minutes. So, be like a 12th man in blowouts or something like that. So yeah, I think he's pretty easy to neutralize, and I'm not sure exactly what it brings at this point. But the fact that he does have that combination of size and skill set, and kind of general coordination and agility is somewhat impressive, along with the continued development. Um, but the decision making, just some low efficiency shots, kind of off balance fadeaways. Him missing open teammates, lacking vision even on simpler passes. It's all kind of worrying as far as his upside. He is a high 80s free throw shooter this past season, and he's made some pretty impressive and drastic improvements in his free throw percentage. So there's an indicator of improved touch and the possibility of becoming an elite shot maker this size. Not so much. I wrote elite shot maker, but I should have said more like a elite pure shooter for a guy his size, like for somebody who's 6'8", maybe even 6'9". I think there's some upside of him becoming like a knockdown 3-point shooter, like maybe like a poor man's Gallinari or somebody like that. That's probably a little bit out of his reach to be as good of a shooter as Gallinari, but somebody like a step or two below that as a shooter. And I think that's because he's not a great decision maker. That's kind of his role is somebody like a poor man's Gallinari. If the shot really becomes highly reliable from the 3-point line, he's able to make some of them off movement. And then he's, if you run him off the line, he's able to take two dribbles and, pull up from 15 feet or something like that. And I do like him. Oh yeah, real quick, I'll say he rarely gets all the way to the rim off the dribble, most reliant, on shot making in the mid range. And he does have pretty good fluid mechanics, as I mentioned earlier. Even Oh no, I'm sorry. In the on further shots, there's more reliance on wrist and kind of a flatter arc. Yeah, there you go. So yeah, he kind of. I should have went over this before recording here, but yeah, on further shots, yeah, he kind of again relies more on the wrist, which leads to kind of a uh, flatter arc on his shots from further away, and I think that's something he should and will likely work on. And if his improvement arc on free throw percentage lines up with his ability to eventually improve shooting from deeper range. I think that's kind of the upside you're looking at if you were to take him in the draft, at least from my perspective. Yeah, but as far as defense, I think he's pretty useful. Like on ball defender with his size, can be impactful with his contests, and of course is able to defend multiple archetypes. Thanks to that coordination and size. Provides at least a modicum of weak side rim protection. Definitely bigger players are able to bully him in the post. Like I saw a game versus Arizona, Zeke Naji really manhandled them a couple times there. He has some decent like instincts and like hand eye and ability to kind of create plays and be disruptive defensively and really make an impact on that end with his combination of versatility and kind of again size and mobility to be a disruptive team defender, but again, his lack of recognition and awareness kind of bites him in the butt here as well. And you'll see him miss rotation, kind of tends to be out of position a little bit too often. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, one of the guys people may compare him to is kind of like a poor man's Jaden McDaniels. I think his frame is better, but he is also older and not quite as skilled. And I would say, in some ways, even worse awareness and decision making, especially when you consider that he's been a college player for 3 years. This is his third year, whereas McDaniels is just a freshman. And I would also argue that McDaniels is probably still a better athlete than Smith. But overall, I think they have some similarity, and that's kind of the guy you're looking at. I mean, if you don't want to draft McDaniels in the lotto, I don't see why you would do that and not take Smith, somewhere late in the second round or whatever. I'd probably much rather go for Smith in the second round than McDaniels really high up. So yeah, that's my Chris Smith take. We'll see